Hello, hello. Happy end of Eurovision, if you want to call it that. Um, I know this is a bit of a weird time of day for me to be broadcasting. Let me explain a little bit. Every year that I've covered Eurovision, I have tried to do a short, properly edited video the day after the contest. And usually, like I go outside to the venue and talk about like give a brief summary of the events, but for whatever reason, whenever I try and do it, I'm like really struggling to find my words. Also, I'm gonna close this. I think that yeah, this is a bit nicer on my face. Um, yeah, I'm always like really struggling to get my words together, and I'm like out in public. I look foolish. I keep thinking like everybody's looking at me, thinking, "Wow, can this guy get us?" I know it like they're caught in their own business, but in any case, I've never been able to successfully do that. So this is sort of going to be a compensation for that. I am about to continue my travels. I'm still in Basel, moving on after today. But yeah, I wanted to just have a little bit of a chat now that we've seen the grand final, and just check in with some of you and see if there's any specific questions that you have. Another thing that I want to do is I do want to pull up uh, let me just get this up. I want to pull up the score. I want to use Eurovision World's website. Um, I'm sure most of you know, but yeah, that's not working. Um, I don't want to share the entire screen. I want to share just one page. Anyway, most of you know that Eurovision World organizes this data pretty neatly. If you haven't used it, then you definitely should. It gives you a breakdown of whose points went to who. It doesn't, let's say, like have the full jury breakdown or anything like that. For that, you have to look at the detailed voting page on Eurovision's website, but it's still pretty useful. Anyway, I'll figure that out eventually. Hello to Joseph July. A lot to digest this year. Yeah, I mean, that's yeah, that's it. Celebrated like mad once JJ won on Saturday, early Sunday morning. Hope you're doing well. Hello to Copyright Breaker 22. Those results have been a struggle. Yeah, I mean, it's not just about digesting the results. It's also just kind of like the events in general, and we'll get to that. But just to kind of briefly touch on things, I don't think that anybody should have been that surprised if we've been paying attention to what we've known since last year. I don't think that these results should have been that much of a surprise. But in any case, hello to Tom Yam. How did Norway and Sweden not do better? And how did Estonia get third somehow ahead of Sweden? Um, with respect to Norway, maybe let me try and see if I can get this thing to share again. Allow screen. Browser's blocked your screen. Okay, never mind. Maybe what I'll do instead is present, slides and PDFs, extra camera, video file, image file, share screen, don't share screen, allow. Um, that's fine. Um, Maybe I'll just pull this up and I don't need to see myself as I'm doing this. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so where did Norway finish? Norway finished in 18th. I don't know, like I never really thought of Norway in particular as a heavy hitter. I think that it was one of those entries that ticks a lot of boxes for Eurovision. It was a very Norwegian entry. I feel like last year's last place with Gotha and Ulvehem had scared them a little bit, and instead they sent something that was very much in character from what we've seen before. Um, how did they do? It was 22 with the jury, 67 with the televote. Yeah, so it's like I don't know, kind of same old, a song that is more appreciated by the televote than the jury. I don't think that he was like particularly the best singer either. He's very young. He's got a lot of time to improve, but yeah, I mean, I guess people enjoyed it. It still advanced to the final. And then how did he do in the semifinal as well? And then maybe I could also let me see option. Uh, Norway. Oh yeah, I came eighth in the semifinal. Yeah, I don't know. It's just to me, it was never really a heavyweight entry. As for Sweden, I mean, Sweden was considered to be the most likely to win, but at the end of the day, I think the result was kind of typical for what we would expect for this kind of entry. Not necessarily from Sweden, but a bit more support from the public than the jury. Um, as for how Estonia did better with espresso macchiato, I mean, Tommy Cash has been kind of riding the sort of cynical political side of Eurovision, like not political in the same way as Israel's entry, but in the way that um, he's always been kind of nodding at the way that Eurovision is not the most serious thing that you can just kind of declare yourself a winner and that will generate enough controversy. Um, but yeah, anyway, this presentation method has been a bit messy, so maybe I won't stick to it. But excuse me, let me get some water in me as well. Copyright Breaker says those results have been a mess since 2022. 2021's results were the last fair Eurovision. I mean, I think what we've learned from last Saturday, 2 days ago, was that it's a crapshoot for the most part. I mean, obviously, you still have people who are going to emerge as heavy hitters. Austria was considered second most likely to win the contest, and then they ended up winning. Um, there are definitely some injustices. There are injustices every year. To me, the biggest one has to be Switzerland coming second with the jury and getting zero from the public. I think if there's ever been a better example of how the host entry is received by at least the general public, I think that would be an example. Sure, it's not like it's not the heaviest hitter in terms of like entertainment quality, but it was very elegantly done. It was very beautifully performed. You would hope that those things would have some appreciation amongst the broader audience. Could also be an indication that the audience that would normally show up for those kind of entries, because a lot of people compared it to Voila, and Voila did very well with the televote and came second overall. Could be that those people are no longer watching, or much fewer of them are watching. But yeah, I've seen a map on Blue Sky with every country's 12 televote points. Almost the entirety of Western Europe voted for Israel, whereas the rest voted for countries such as Greece. So, of course, we have to talk about this. If you don't know, since last year, Israel's government has been running an astroturfing campaign with the explicit intent of boosting the vote as much as possible so that they can generate headlines saying that the world supports Israel. And meanwhile, the EBU keeps saying, "Oh, this is not a political contest." Um, this year it was pretty aggressive. I was able to get the videos that they were using, and it looks like they were targeting every country. Whereas last year they had said they admitted this themselves that they were looking into which countries they could benefit the most. But this time around, it looks like they had uh, gone for everyone because the individual videos are labeled per country, and they had Yuval speak in all of these different languages. So yeah, I mean, this is what they've been trying to do since the beginning, and they were successful. They were successful last year as well, even though they didn't win the show or win the televote, but they were still able to push forward those headlines. And then this year, now, as people who despise the jury would like to say, they're the people's champion, but they became the people's champion with a lot of government support and with a lot of spite. Because if you go on Twitter, various social media outlets, you have people fully admitting that they didn't even listen to the song and they voted for Israel. People saying that they did so to spite wokeism, to spite leftists, to spite Eurovision. Very hateful things being said about Muslims and Islam in general. And this is what Eurovision has become. So yeah, something to think about, and something that we shouldn't tolerate. In fact, there have been, I think there have been a few other broadcasters that have joined in, but some of you might know of some of the controversies that are happening between the EBU and RTVE in Spain. During the second semi-final, the commentators had introduced the song. They had, explained that Yuval was a survivor of the October 7th attacks by Hamas, but then went on to say that up to now there have been more than 50,000 people killed, civilians killed in Gaza, and they declared that it wasn't a statement against any individual country, but it was a statement in the spirit of the contest to protect humanity humanity. It wasn't exactly that. That in itself had the EBU respond by they've threatened them with fines. They've said, like, you're not allowed to politicize the contest in that way, but nothing about it. Like it's always a matter of one person's victimhood is more important than another's. And so before the final, they aired a message which, more or less said the same thing. Just before the broadcast, they had just the text on the screen. Um, and now they've actually called for an audit of the votes. And that, I think, is a bit curious because I don't necessarily know what an audit would entail. They did point out that there was an enormous discrepancy in the quantity of votes between the semifinal and the grand final. You would expect there to be some discrepancies, but I'm sure that they would have the data in previous years to see if there was a substantial difference. But in any case, at least one broadcaster is taking this seriously, as they should. And I believe that if you, like many people, see this as against the spirit of the competition, you should write to your broadcaster and encourage them to support RTVE's campaign in getting to the bottom of this, because it is ridiculous that this competition keeps referring to itself as being non-political, and yet we're completely ignoring that a government department is taking advantage of the competition for its own purposes, while that same government is also killing civilians. One other thing about that, it came to my mind, but I forgot. But anyway, yes, this is what Eurovision is now. What am I supposed to do with my life now? Never too late to pick up a new hobby. You might need to. Um, I'm glad that RTVE publicly asked for the EBU to look into the televote results. Europe awarded 375 televote points to Amar Pellestois and 250 to Voila, and a nil point to Voyage. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do think that it might be a matter of the audience that would normally show up for that has tuned out of it, tuned out of Eurovision. One thing that I'm going to be very curious to see are the ratings when they come out, which they tend to trickle out over a period of time, and then the EBU will do their like mass update. I also think that when it comes to TV ratings in general and using the Nielsen system, like, it's far from perfect. There have been criticisms of the Nielsen system for a long time, and if let's say that the numbers are showing like similar viewership to like what we've seen before, because like last year's show was, not too different from the year before. I would have to believe that if it's the Nielsen system that's showing those same numbers, they were probably underestimating it from before, because there's very clearly widespread dissatisfaction with Eurovision. And it could be that it's such a minor discrepancy that it's just not showing in the actual numbers that they get through the ratings. But it'll be very interesting to see if there's more of a substantial difference this year. What else are you saying? The biggest lessons of these results is that there's no monolithic European, and that all acts are slick, immediate, and distinctive, and that acts that are slick, immediate, and distinctive will always perform best. Yeah, I mean, I think that's overall it's true. The commentator before did mention Amar Pellestois, which was not necessarily slick and immediate. It was, I mean, it was compelling, but it was compelling in a very different way. So yes, this tends to be the kind of thing that we talk about with Eurovision. Like, you got to grab people's attention really immediately. You have to make sure that you aren't forgotten by the end of the night. But yeah, it is curious that songs that are distinctive but not necessarily for having the immediate pop or kind of outrageous qualities, to have something like that score so low is not very encouraging for artists who bring that kind of music. One thing that I'm very happy about, is that more countries that sent their non-so-typical ESC songs got a lot of appreciation, like Lithuania, Albania, Latvia, and Germany. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, yeah, with respect to all of those, I think all of those are really good results. Let me put these up here. maybe I can yeah, there we go. So you said Albania, yeah, Albania eighth. Um, I mean, definitely lower with the jury than we would have wanted, but still a great result with the televote. I think that was fifth overall. Yeah, yeah. So great finish for Albania. Latvia, left-hand side finish, beautiful performance. Also, if we go over to semifinal two, Latvia came second. Who would have predicted that, considering that for the longest time they were considered to not even qualify? With the odds had them as a non-qualifier for a long time. Lithuania too. I think it would have been nicer to see Lithuania go a little bit higher than 16th, but it still, goes to show you that that song had a substantial audience. 60, how many? 62 televotes. Yeah. And who is the other one that you said? Germany? Oh yeah, Germany. Germany 15th. And I think especially with like that kind of uh like it was a fairly weak performance, I have to say. And I think that, people can kind of see that. Like, and I don't necessarily mean weak in a personality way. It's just, it wasn't, when compared to the other singers that we had, it wasn't that impressive, but it was a great vibe, really catchy song, one that I really enjoy listening to personally, and one that has been tracking well on streaming platforms. So I'm very happy that that got, it wasn't how we anticipate a German song's result. So yeah, it's been pretty good. Um, Let me just, okay. My take from ESC in the last few years, unless there's someone extremely talented like Maneskin, you need a jury song that has a wow moment that will pull enough televote points to win. Um, yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I think in Måneskin's year, a lot of people had kind of theorized that what helped them was that they brought this rock concert atmosphere that we had been missing because it was still kind of in the depths of COVID. Not everybody had been vaccinated at that point. In fact, I think like I didn't to get my first vaccine until a few weeks after that. And so, yeah, I think that that really played into their that played into their hand very well. And like you don't really get performers like that all the time. And look at what happened. Hello from the Philippines. I'm so proud of JJ in Austria. Vincent Bueno, who is also Filipino, represented Austria in a previous edition, of course. I'm honestly surprised by the Filipino community in Europe. Yeah, great. I've heard, in particular, there's been a lot of Filipino pride about this win. So yeah, that's always great to see. Um Kalu, Tommy Cash has done a good job in bringing a lot of noise around his performance, and I also think in a year where the songs are lacking good hooks, Espresso Macchiato stands out heavily as a good pop song. That I will agree with, and while I'm definitely not a fan of the overall vibe of the song or him or the performance, what I will happily admit is that the chorus is great. If the song was just the chorus, then I would be fine with it. I would be Yeah, I could listen to that at least. As for the rest of it, I simply do not care. But congrats on getting third. Um, Eastern Europe televoters once again showing good taste by showing up for a beautiful Balkan ballad. I assume that you're talking about Greece in this case, which yeah, I'm really happy that got its flowers. It's interesting because I remember in the preseason, a lot of people were talking about that song not even qualifying, saying that it was like, too boring. I've always felt like it has like a really magic quality to it, and I think it was staged very well. Um, Not like the most like effective lighting or atmosphere, but it was still, it suited the song very well. It had a narrative going on, a meaningful reveal, which is also something that I feel like we're really lacking. Like often the reveals are such they're so forced. And I've said this before, like, somebody walks on stage with a trench coat, like Georgia this year, like you see what she's wearing and you're like, okay, yeah, that's coming off. And you're just kind of waiting for it to happen. In this case, it was a surprise, and it's like a transformation as well, and it's just for the end of the song. So a very tasteful way to do a costume reveal, and I hope that we see more of those. What else? Is it true that Moroccan Oil's contract expires this year or next year? I believe that the arrangement was always until 2025. Um, I mean, I also wouldn't be surprised if they renew it. I should mention as well that Moroccan oil is brought up a lot when talking about Israel. The discussion is often because Moroccan oil is an Israeli company and they are the feature sponsors. That might not be the right term, but basically, like Moroccan oil is the one who gets the big logo plastered on everything. They get a little advert at the front of the show, so they're pouring the most money into this. Um, Something I want people to keep in mind, however, is that the EBU, before Moroccan oil even entered the picture, the EBU was making similar excuses in the past as far as how they conduct themselves, the decisions that they make, and for forcing this non-political description. So while I'm not going to rule out the influence of Moroccan oil, I don't think that people should be kind of defaulting on this reasoning that because Moroccan oil is the sponsor, then all these reasons are happening because uh, there are. I mean, really, the EBU. What's become clear from these past 2 years is that the EBU serves itself. A lot of people have observed that before, but I think that this is clear. It's much more clear to a broader audience. Um, they the contest has lost a number of members in the last few years, and it becomes less affordable for everyone else if more people are dropping out. So yeah, it should the discussion shouldn't be focused on just the broadcaster, and I hope that, or sorry, just the sponsor. And I think that people should kind of look to Eurovision's history, see the kind of decision making that they've made at that point, and yeah, just be critical from as many angles as possible. Yes, I noticed this as well. The leader of the biggest party in Netherlands also promoted voting for Israel just despite left wingers. Yeah, and apparently this is not a political contest, of course. Um, my take on Voyage is that the staging, while striking, didn't land as well during the grand final as it did during the semi. Plus, Zoe May's singing was more shaky. Yeah, I mean, well, depending on which performance you saw in the semi, because in the semi, if you were watching it live, then they had the camera issue. Um, the performance that got uploaded afterwards was from the jury show the night before. Um, so yeah, I mean, it could be that maybe like just with the energy, something didn't land quite as well. But it's my opinion that people are, in addition to like the audience for the song not really being there. I think that like people are thinking about the host country and whether or not they want to vote for them again. That's how I felt for a while. I think the reason why there are some exceptions, the, the only exceptions are the countries that tend to do best at Eurovision in the most recent years. So like Sweden, Ukraine, Italy. Um, and for them they're often bringing really competitive songs and they have um they're just always getting support every year no matter what. So yeah. Could you talk a little bit about Remember Monday getting 0 points from the public and 88 points from the jury? So um I feel like this kind of song was a hard sell. um yeah, like the the purpose of it, I don't even know what the purpose of it, but like the the, they are West End performers. That's my understanding, or at least like that's the vibe that they were going for, where it was something out of a musical. And when you put that up against songs that are, they're not all pop songs, but they're meant to be either something that you would listen to outside of the contest, or they're something that's a little bit more Eurovision specific. Whereas this didn't really land in either of those two areas. Um, but yeah, and then the song itself, like it just takes so many different changes, and as I've said in the past, like it feels like a lot of the songs this year are quite unfocused, and this one again would work very well in a musical, because in a musical you can have that kind of theatrical changing in rhythm and like use that to further a narrative. But yeah, I just don't think that it was the best choice for Eurovision. But I mean, I think that at least from a performance point of view, they justified their place there, and I think that would explain the points from the jury. They even got a 12 from. I'm just taking a quick look over here. I'm not going to pull it up on screen, but was it Ukraine that gave them a 12? UK. Oh no, the UK gave Latvia 12, and where are they? Oh, Italy. Oh yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. Italy's jury votes sometimes are peculiar to say the least. Carlos saying Eurovision became to an end. Um, UK viewership tanked by about 1 million. Oh, wow. Was watched by just under 7 million. 2023 was watched by nearly 11 million. Yeah, and obviously in the year that it hosted, that the UK hosted, then you would expect a boost in viewership. 1 million is substantial, especially for one market. Yeah, it's not everybody, but it's still that's a major loss. That's like what, 16, 17% or so. I'm not don't count so much on my math skills, but that sounds like that. Crazy that the execs were locked in a room in mute, but they think there wasn't an issue. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw that, it was just like, wow, this is really what we've come to. I will say that the that segment, that throwing to the executive supervisor, or what they used to call the scrutineer, to verify the votes, while it is like sort of a tradition that they've kept for a while, it's so unnecessary. Just get to the votes, Like, we don't need to talk to some guy who gives us a thumbs up. And I remember as well, in the American Song Contest, because that was like largely Christer Bjorkman's project, he included that segment. So that was his moment to be the executive supervisor. And what was his line? It was like, make it happen, I think. Um, it's unnecessary. Like, just get to the votes. We don't need someone giving their thumbs up. Um, yeah. So yeah, I think at this point they might as well just ditch it. Biggest surprise for me, stats wise, was that there's a huge discrepancy between the semifinal and grand final rankings. Latvia second, Ukraine first, Estonia fifth. Um, oh, I didn't even realize that Estonia was fifth. I mean, one thing to remember as well is that it's two different audiences, right? Or at least like there is a discrepancy in the audience, and also like for an audience that might not necessarily tune in to, like, they might not be glued to the national selection season like a lot of the passionate fans are, but they'll see and hear the songs for the first time uh, at the semifinal. They might not necessarily be wowed by it in the moment to vote for it, but then it might sit with them throughout the week, and then when they see it at the end of the week, maybe they change their voting. So I don't think it's that big of a surprise that there's such a big difference. In the past, however, when um, there was one song from 2021 where the ranking in the televote went from first in several countries, getting a lot of 12 points, to last in the grand final, and that looks suspicious. I don't know how often that has happened, but I remember people had made some comments about that. Um, Eric Anderson, I guess the whole juries look at odds and Sweden will always do well with the juries can be considered debunked now. Yes. Um, and I mean, it's not that Sweden did poorly with the juries either. But yeah, I think they got what they deserved. They got a great result. They didn't need to win again so soon after, just having hosted last year. A lot of people really liked the song. So yeah, I think, they're I don't think anybody is upset with Sweden not winning, or at least if they are, I haven't heard anything about that. I think Eurovision is at a moral and structural crossroad. I really hope things are about to change. I can't live through this for a third year in a row. Um, yeah, something to think about, I would say. Eurovision was at a crossroad in late 2023. The EBU has made its choice and it's been doubling down since. Yes, and another thing to consider, something that I have been considering for a while myself. Um, I still feel a need to pay attention to the developments, especially, as I mentioned at the start of this video, with the audits that they're going to be doing, or at least that they've requested, and this discussion that RTE in Ireland had requested about Israel's participation. Definitely, that there are things that I want to pay attention to, but it might not necessarily be the actual 2026 contest, I have to say. Here we go. We should invite the Philippines to compete for the ESC 70th anniversary. That would be really nice. I mean, I might not watch it, but that would be nice for the Philippines. uh, Greece never really hit me. The staging felt a bit too much like Jerry Hale's performance. That's interesting. I can kind of see that with like her standing on the rock. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think this year the songs overall there was just less consensus about anything, and that was one thing that was reflected in the score. And I think that people have kind of become accustomed to seeing these fatter uh, point values, the bigger point values at the top, and then everything trickling down to the bottom. Um, but I think that the fact that this year felt open and that there were also a lot of people, myself included, saying that this year felt weak and that it was a downgrade to previous years. I think that that was a reflection of the score. Um, uh, so yeah, I I just think that there were very few songs that were going to win over everyone, or at least like the kinds of songs that leave as big of an impression as previous ones have. This year showed that you can have success with something that represents your country's culture, especially with Greece, Albania, and Latvia doing so well. I hope that theme continues into 2026. ESC has always been political. Just by being selectively apolitical is actually political. Yeah, and I mean, I have to say that as somebody who, in my media studies class in high school, learned this. We had this lesson on the 8 concepts of media, and the sixth concept is that like all media has political implications, which is basically to say that you could have the most seemingly apolitical media you can think of and still extrapolate political ideologies or messaging from it. So yeah, it's such a non-statement now to say that. Well, it's not even a non-statement; it's a full-out lie that Eurovision is apolitical. It's something that the EBU has been saying for their convenience. What's your take on this? All right, I guess this is kind of what I was saying. What's your take on this year's winner only getting 436 points? For reference, Ukraine 2022 beats that with their televotes alone. Yeah, I think it's just that the points were spread out a lot more. Yeah, and there wasn't like a very clear heavyweight at any point. Even I think the fact that Sweden was leading the odds with a song that like nobody would have ever considered that to be a winning song in previous years. I think that was an example of how like we weren't going to get consensus on anything. So yeah. Um, have you seen other creators talking about ESC? Hasanabi. Oh yes, I did see the thumbnail for this. And yeah, I mean that's great that it's finally getting out there, and it's like it's about time. Um, Hopefully that kind of thing. I mean, like at the end of the day, um, real action has to come from the broadcasters. But getting the message out there should hopefully build up pressure. Um, do you think there is a chance the EBU last minute took Switzerland's televote points and gave them to Austria to prevent Israel winning? No, I think this is a conspiracy theory. Um, yeah, there's no reason to suggest that, and yeah, like I highly doubt that there is any manipulation on the part of the EBU of the score. As much as that sounds like a convenient thing to create these results that are like comfortable, there's really no basis for a theory like that. So yeah, I think that the points are the points. Um, there are always external factors that influence the points, but when we're talking about in Israel's case, like the government using their money to influence the score and the EBU saying it's a contest between broadcasters, not governments, that is clearly a discrepancy. There's no way that you can concretely make that argument, especially after this has happened for the second year in a row. UK seems to have a hard time finding their identity in Eurovision. I mean, I think they just need to send something that's like really exciting. Somebody said, it might have been 2 days ago, somebody said, if they could find a grime artist that, doesn't have like a problematic history, then maybe that would be the key to success. Um, the voting system needs big changes. No ads should be allowed. People with multiple credit cards can vote 20 times per credit card. That shouldn't be possible. I would say that at this point, why do you need to vote multiple times for a song? Why not just vote once for the songs that you like? And you can give people 20 votes that they can use for 20 songs. Or, well, I wouldn't say maybe like give them 26 so that they can vote for everyone if they like. But yeah, I would say that either one vote for song or a cap. So like 3 votes. And this is something that I've proposed in the past. Um, but yeah, if you're going to give people that much voting power, then it's time to start putting a cap on things, because it's unnecessary. Like, why does somebody like, especially when you consider that voting is more costly in some countries than others, it's not necessary to uh, uh, put that much, like, put all your weight behind one song. Um, Something to bear in mind with the televote system is that it's non-proportional and punishes clones, multiple songs that appeal to the same audience. There were 2 groups of clones this year. I'm curious which clones, uh, which songs you consider to be clones, but it is a good point that the jury and televote vote in very different ways. The jury has to rank every song from first to last. Televote votes for whatever they want, and like, this is kind of also a further example of why 20 votes for one song. It's like, imagine if a juror had decided to write one song from 1 to 25 and then put like whatever song they dislike the most at the bottom. Yeah, it's just, it doesn't make sense. Um, You could fix this with sequential proportional approval voting with minimal changes to the user interface voting. I What I thought was interesting is that somebody had looked into the back end of the voting app some time ago, and it seemed like there was an option for premium voting, which could be interesting if they were to make that like a proportional ballot. Ballot is a very, like, it sounds like an election kind of thing, but I mean, Eurovision is essentially, it's a pop culture election, right? Um, but yeah, like, if let's say that they had this premium vote that cost a little bit more, but then you could do more of a ranked vote, then that would be a great way to get people to vote for multiple songs. But if you're going to be voting for one song, then I don't think that you need 20 votes. Um, let's see. Execs look around, everybody on mute. Yeah, it was just really, really silly. Maybe they need a scrutineer in order to plan how they present the votes, in which order they contact um, the country's delegations, and popular vote, just to keep the show more interesting as they present. Hold on, let me read this again. I'm not sure if I'm understanding it. How they present the votes, in which order they contact the country's delegations, and the popular vote, just to keep the show more interesting. I mean, that is kind of what they do, right? At least with respect to the jury vote. Supposedly, they organize it so that um, it is so that the votes are presented in a way that keeps it exciting. Now, when we're talking about the results for 2023 and 2024, um, like, all the 12s, most of the 12s were accumulating around one entry, so you weren't really going to get that kind of you weren't going to make it that exciting no matter how you shuffled everything around. Um, but yeah, I might be missing something in your comment, but it sounds like that's kind of what they already, excuse me, what they already do. Um, in y'all's opinion, what measures can be taken to hopefully control mass voting from Israel's campaigns? Because unfortunately, I don't see a path for the EBU disqualifying Israel. Um, I mean, some of the things I just said, like, limiting the quantity of votes. Um, but yeah, and let me say this as well. I had a lot of people after the grand final. I had a lot of people message me being like, "How are you doing? Are you okay?" I accepted a long time ago that a win for Israel is possible, and if it happens, so be it. Because we can very clearly see through how they are tackling this voting campaign that they are trying to undermine the contest itself. And so, if that's what the EBU is okay with allowing, then let it be. Um, I honestly think that at this point, there's only one choice. They need to go. Um, yeah, the, and it's not even that like Eurovision is not the most important thing in the world, but it's very clearly an important tool for their government. It's the same government that is currently facing charges of genocide at the world's highest courts. Um, Aside from that, everybody has been seeing like the use of starvation as a weapon of war. The like sniper bullets do not end up in the heads and chests of children by accident. As soon as that was found out, there should like everybody should have dropped everything and done everything that they could to stop this. But it's been 19 months. So yeah, they can make all the changes that they want apart from removing Khan, but ultimately they need to remove Khan. That is the only way that this show, as it is right now, I wouldn't have said this in the past, but like seeing it now, like it is the utmost priority if Eurovision wants to have any sense of seriousness. Um, anyway, this is going to come up quite often. Tom Yam, yeah, Manila 2017, sorry, 2027. Still waiting for Eurovision Asia. Yeah, I mean, it's supposedly Eurovision Latin America is supposed to happen this year. I would be very surprised if it actually does. But yeah, that's what they're saying. What about ESC being limited to having EU countries? So here's the thing, because a lot of people say this. Like I get this comments on my videos a lot. Like, why is Israel participating? They're not even in Europe. That also gets thrown at like Australia or Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, and if the messaging of this contest is going to be like diversity and inclusion and all those things, and like the base level criteria, um, or part of the base level criteria was not having to be on continental Europe, it was about being within the European broadcasting area. Now there's an exception that's being continually made for Australia, so that's not even a criteria anymore. Um, be careful about this kind of insistence because I mean it is a Eurocentric thing, and at times I'm not saying that this is coming from you, but at times there is a bit of racism behind it, behind insisting that it has to be we can only include countries of Europe because they're not problematic. That's not the case. Uh, we have we I'm from Canada, but I'm of European heritage, so I'm gonna excuse me for including myself in this, but like, you know, a lot of the way that the world is right now is because of European colonialism. Israel exists because of European colonialism. So yeah, I mean, that's why I really don't like this point of view of like, if we just exclude the other ones, then everything will be okay. No, I mean, Russia is a European country. Technically, they lie in both Europe and Asia, but Russia was too much of a threat to to this contest being in disrepute. So yes, please be careful with this point of view. Um, TBD TBD about this. Um, Ireland ESC fan here. I boycotted watching this year, but I still had the Israeli entry pushed to my YouTube feed as an ad multiple times. Not happy with that from any country at any time. I mean, and I've always been of the opinion that like when you use those ads, um, firstly, like if you haven't done so already, at least for your like laptops and all that, install ad blockers. Um, you don't need you don't need that in your life. You've got enough to focus on. um, and then like there are also some that you can do for mobile apps, but sometimes they're a little bit. I don't know if they're necessarily the most trustworthy. Um, but yeah, so firstly, there's that. But then also like when it comes to like Malta has been one that's been known to use ads. Key difference here, it hasn't yet been concluded that those ads are funded by a government office that is not their public broadcaster. And even if it was, it's not necessarily that Israel's is still bad and Malta's is okay. It just further proves that the EBU's reasoning to keep Israel in the contest, that it's just between the broadcasters and not the governments, it just proves it wrong even further, right? And I recalled that I did see an ad for some act that said vote up to 20 times, which is not usually the case, but that's what we saw last year with Israel and this year. And so now like a new precedent is being set where the other ad campaigns are also throwing that in, which is not I really don't like that. Um, no limiting limiting no limiting it to EU countries excludes Norway, Albania, Switzerland, and the reason they never do it the UK. Oh yeah, the UK is not in the EU. And I think when I was answering that question, I was more thinking about like Europe as a continent. So yeah, like don't just limit it to EU countries because that's only like what 27, and then you're down to one show, right? Um, EBU tampering with results is clearly BS. Do you really think they would let Israel win the televote if that's the case? Yeah. Well, I mean, there's something to say that they wouldn't manipulate it in order for that to not happen. But I agree with you 100% about. Maybe I should rephrase this so that I'm not misunderstood. I don't think that there's any tampering with the results on the EBU's part, and if there was any tampering with the results, I don't necessarily think that that would be a motive to change it. In any case, yeah, if anybody suggests that they decided to take some points off of one song and put it towards another, I would shoot that argument down completely. Um, Hi, I literally paid zero attention to Eurovision this year. I found you after getting those bizarre and tasteless localized Israel ads. Oh, really? I'd be curious how you found me through all of that. um, I'd be, yeah, I do with a limit of 3 or 5 votes per song. Yeah, and that's what I think as well. Um, Did you know that the Israeli government wants to close Khan Israel broadcaster and that Karen Pelez, the writer of the song, has been banned from national events for her criticism of the Israeli government? I don't know about the second part. I didn't know that. I did a video about how yes, it is true that Israel's government has been trying to shut down Khan, and there are political motivations behind that. However, they haven't done so yet, and some of the other proposals that have been put forward are that they want to take over their finances, which would ultimately have an effect on their programming, and they also want to appoint members of their board so that they would have more direct control over it. The fact that the government can shut down the broadcaster is a further example of how this independence claim is bunk. It means nothing. In when we're looking at all the broadcasters that participate, um, Azerbaijan has on paper an independent broadcaster, but in Azerbaijan, that independent broadcaster cannot criticize their government at all. It's not allowed on any media in Azerbaijan. So it really means nothing. Even if there's this tension between Israel's broadcaster and their government, it does not mean that their government can't be exploiting the Eurovision participation as well. And another thing to keep in mind about this as well is that like the broadcaster itself is made up of various different departments, and I assume that these motivations to shut Khan down have to do more with their news department. Um, in any case, that's the best I can say about that. Um, what if you had to rank the songs like the juries do in an app? I mean, so I think that would be a good idea. I do think, however, that they have been prioritizing accessibility because you can still call and send a text message in order to vote. And in certain countries with like, weaker infrastructure, I think that that's still needed to have that as an option. And also there's probably like an accessibility side to that too. If you know, it's easier for somebody who's visually impaired to use the phone versus a touch screen, then that makes sense. But that's why I think like if they wanted to incentivize voting multiple times, then yeah, they could do that, and that could be what the premium vote is, where you can even do a fully ranked top 10. You can have your own 12, 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But like that's like that would be a premium. Whereas if you're just voting the regular way, then I would say limit it to 3 votes in total. 20 is far too much. Um, let's see. Practical in terms of rehearsal before the jury votes are received. Oh, this is interesting. So, I think this is with respect to ordering the way that the countries are contacted. That's possible. It's possible that they've kind of ditched that and now they just kind of aside from first and last, they might be randomizing it. Let me know if you've seen that in like an interview or something, because there are a lot of Eurovision myths. Like I remember hearing somebody once saying that the juries purposefully vote down Poland to counter their diaspora, and it's like, to whose interest is that? If there's somebody on a jury who really likes the Polish song, why are they going to put other songs ahead of it just because? Like, yeah. So it's just a note to be mindful of the information that you read. Um, the website instructing you that you can vote on multiple cards feels like them giving a very clear avenue for people to manipulate the process. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we've talked about this at length already. It seems like voting multiple times is not interesting. Uh, Sorry, I don't know if I just made. I don't know if I made sense. Whenever I'm doing these, I'm like my mind is in 3 different places, and also I'm trying my best to pull up comments that are not very inflammatory. Okay. Televote is a huge mess. We have 2 countries that tend to siphon like 1/4 of available points no matter what. And then you have neighborly votes. Fandom tends to vote strategically rather than by heart. Did you see any people saying that they were going to vote strategically this year? Because I saw it last year. This year I didn't see any of that myself. But yeah, and I mean, I've said this before. When that happens, they're voting politically as well, right? And I think people just need to accept at this point that like politics are inevitable when it comes to Eurovision, but we don't have to accept. There are certain politics that we should not accept, and when it comes down to the worst of all human rights violations, that is something that people should be standing up against. Um, David Gonzalez saying, hopefully there will be a new reference group led by RTVE, and also 2026 will be more influenced by Martin Green compared to 2025. So I understand that I think it's Ana Maria Bordas is taking over as head of the reference group next month. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if because they've already re-elected new members to the reference group, so I don't think that they're going to just make some sweeping changes right away. I think what's pretty clear, because when they announced that they were going to be having this broad discussion with all members about Israel's participation, my first question was like, why are we having that discussion now after 2 contests? Was it literally just left up to the reference group? Did you not think that that was serious enough to broaden the discussion back when it was happening? So that I am quite curious about. Um, do you think we should have an even smaller contest, such as a more basic stage, which could put the cost down? I think that in order for the contest to survive, that might be something that needs to happen. Um, I don't think the stage is really like the most costly element of it, and I haven't looked enough into this to tell you which parts of Eurovision are the most costly. Um, but I yeah I would be totally fine with a downsized Eurovision. I think what would need to happen is that the songs would need to be much better than they were this year. I think when you have something that is like really just carried by its performer, then that I think you don't need all the special effects. You don't need, all the various forms of equipment that they have. But it would mean that they would need to rethink a lot of the delegations would need to rethink their strategies, and it would be to the contest's benefit to have the juries back in the semifinal. Um, let's see. All I'm thinking right now is Ich komme, ich komme. How the frick did that get out of the top 10? I mean, it was great. I don't think it was 11th, so it just missed out on the top 10. And let me just take a look over here to see in points how big of a difference was it. Oh, so yeah, that's like 18 points, right? Am I doing my math right? Yeah, yeah. So 18 points. Yeah, Switzerland is 214, Finland is 196. So I mean, yeah, it's not a bad finish at all. Um, One thing that I've said in the past was that because it has a sexual nature, and especially like in this case, like it's not just that she's dressed provocatively, it's that the song is "I'm Coming," and I don't necessarily have a problem with that on a personal level. I think that other people might see that as a bit too specific, a bit like more of a more specific expression of sexuality than we normally get when we're just seeing somebody who is dressed provocatively. Um, and so for that reason, I think that might have turned away some people. It was, it was a provocative entry, and I think that for being provocative, it was successful. But I don't know. It's not. It's when looking at the songs that finished above it. So the top 10 from bottom to top are Switzerland, Ukraine, Albania, France, Greece, Italy, Sweden, Estonia, Israel, and Austria. My choice, I mean, obviously, factoring out Israel because it's my opinion that they shouldn't even be in the contest. But if we're looking at the other songs that are in the top 10, my choice would have been for Estonia to be out. And I would have put Finland maybe somewhere in the middle there. But I won't deny that Tommy Cash is a sensation. He is an artist that is hard to ignore, and that it totally works in his favor. Um, so yeah. How did Claude get outside the top 10? I mean, kind of same reasons. So where did Netherlands finish again? 12th. Yeah, so they're just below them. Yeah, I don't know if I really have anything more unique to say. Obviously, like in the Netherlands case, it wasn't a sexually provocative performance, but it was well done. And I was never the most excited by the song personally, and I feel like there were so many elements of it that felt familiar, but not in a plagiarism way, just more in the way of like this is reminding me of something. It produced a feeling of nostalgia that isn't necessarily uh, a really deep level of nostalgia, but it there's a coziness to it. And while I think that's a very admirable quality of the song, I don't think it really says vote for me, right? Um, but still a good result. Um, I'm curious what you think of Australia's future in Eurovision. 2 years of NQ, what do we need to do differently? How can we develop a Eurovision identity when the country itself is so diverse? This is very interesting because Australia, um, for a while, they were considered like a powerhouse. I mean, it was relatively early to call it that, but they had a consistent qualification record. They also tended to depend more on the juries than the televote, or at least like they were more successful with the juries than televote. Um, and then, after 2020, in 2023, when the juries were taken out of the semifinals, there was that discussion of like, is the televote really going to show up for Australia? And not only did they do that, but Australia won that semifinal. Um, so I don't know. I think it might be too soon to be like theorizing about like what is not being done right. I think this year I was actually watching a video of is it Justin Hawkins? I have to look at my history so that I make sure that I got it right. But he's the lead singer from Justin Hawkins. He's the lead singer from The Darkness, if you remember The Darkness from the 2000s with I Believe in a Thing Called Love. And he was doing a reaction to to Gojo's performance. And watching it back, apart from like hearing his comments, which were funny and a bit mean at times, but they were funny. Watching it back, I also kind of noticed that Gojo was pretty shaky. I did notice that he was shaky on the night, but it was more apparent to me then. And also like the expressions he kept doing, like I kept seeing him do this with his left, well, with both arms, but like it it was almost like he didn't know what to do with them. And I think that maybe he would have benefited from a bit more of a like more pointed direction. And then with that, the staging was essentially built off of a reveal after a reveal after a reveal. So, I mean, it came across as a bit gimmicky, and I don't think it was particularly effective. But he did finish 11th in the semifinal anyway, much like Electric Fields did last year, and it was yeah, a 10-point difference. So, not like it wasn't like super close, but it was close enough. Um, and I think was it in the first semifinal where yeah, this the first semifinal had a very slight difference between San Marino and Cyprus, just 2 points between the two of them. So yeah. Um, what is the point of having a live song contest that has a fake applause? The point is preventing the audience from expressing their disapproval. When they were challenged on this last year, they had said that they didn't really acknowledge it, but they said, they make sure that the contest is a comfortable viewing experience for everyone at home. And there is a fairness to that, I think, in the sense that like if the booing was so loud that you couldn't hear the music, then obviously you're going to want to, bring the levels down so that the song can be heard. But that's not what they did. Um, yeah, this year they had the audio control on lockdown because of last year. Last year, they, in addition to keeping the mic level quite low, they were playing fake applause on top of it, and that was deduced by GJ Kwijben from the Netherlands. He had found the sample that they used in Melfest and matched it to the because obviously SVT was the host broadcaster last year, so they use a lot of the same production elements, or like some of the same production elements. Um, and so he played a clip from Melfest and a clip from when Martin Osterdahl was booed to point out, because your ear is very good at finding matches when they're played consecutively, and you can hear that it's like the same rhythm of clapping. It fades out in the very same way. That is unnecessary, and it is a distortion of reality. You are deliberately covering up the protests of the audience. And the number of delegations complained about that last year. So this is how they've decided to deal with it. Um, you can't be more wrong. You don't know anything about Israeli people and are just blinded by hate and, dare I say, prejudice. I will say that a lot of the opinions that have informed my position the most have actually been of Israelis. Um, Before coming to Basel, it was a very interesting week for me. I watched three different pieces that were quite actually, yeah. I don't think I can speak about the third one, but there are two pieces that I want to talk about. The first one was a documentary by the comedian Noam Schuster Eliassi, I think is her full name, and it's called "Coexistence My Ass." She grew up in a community called the Oasis of Peace, and it was largely seen as an example of how Israelis and Palestinians could, coexist. I don't want to reveal too much about the documentary. If it comes around, you should definitely watch it. But the way that she sums it up at the end very perfectly counters a lot of the arguments about how the situation is very complicated. It's not complicated. Palestinians do not have the same rights that Israelis have, and they need to. In order for there to be peace, they need to have the same rights. Period. And that's all I'm going to say. The second piece that I saw was it was like a news magazine show that we have on not the national broadcaster, but the local public broadcaster in Ontario, called The Agenda. And he had two people from the NGO standing together. So one was Israeli, one was Palestinian, and the discussion, it was framed in a way where it's just like like I think the reason why the issue isn't addressed head on is because people reduce it to like, oh, can't they just get along, like can't they just see themselves as the same, and like, yes, that should be how things work. Why don't those things work? Well, one group of people does not have the same level of access. One group of people, depending on where they live, were their families or themselves were forced from their homes in the 1940s. To frame this as if it's like an even playing field where they just need to come meet in the middle is completely bunk, especially right now where you know this suggestion that Israel has gone into Gaza to free the hostages and yet has declined every hostage deal since then, or not every hostage deal, but because obviously some have been brought home, but that they broke the ceasefire in order to resume the war is an example of how this was never about the hostages. So in any case, I could go a lot deeper about this, but if anybody ever tells me, "Oh, you don't know anything that you're talking about, you don't know anything about this," the only reason why you're saying that is because you don't like what I'm saying. Um, there's nothing wrong with voting strategically, voting with your neighbor, or voting with your neighbor or your country if you're a part of the diaspora, as long as it's in good faith. It's impossible to remove all these biases. I mean, I think that if there's a need to vote strategically, then there's a problem. I also don't think that there's a problem if you want to vote, like, as they say, root for the home team, right? I don't think that if you're living in the UK and you want to vote for Lithuania, I don't think that there's a problem with that. But at the same time, like, if you feel that you need to vote a certain way in order to avoid another outcome, that's a problem. And we need to address why that mentality exists. Okay. Well, I've already passed an hour, and I know that I've got tons of comments coming in. And I always think that I'm further down the list than I am. What I'll do is maybe I will. Okay, I'll go to an hour 15 minutes. I'll get a few more in. Um, let's see. I think part of the reason a lot of songs underperformed is the crowd being muted made them feel emptier. I do think actually that's a good point in terms of not feeling the energy coming from the audience did impact how the songs came across on screen. I do think that's a good point. Um, what? Okay, so I am at the bottom. I just want to remind you that a Jewish area which lived near the border with Gaza were really pro-Palestine, and October 7th were brutally killed. I do know that there was a Canadian who was a peace activist who was killed during that time. The takeaway from that should not be that you know Palestinians are just as bad or anything like that, or like this conflict is not about who is the better or worse human being, and even framing it in that putting in that kind of framing is a problem. The problem is that there is a power structure in place that does not allow for peace to exist, and that power structure needs to be dismantled. In any case, the fact that there are people who are supportive of peace and that they would be killed by senseless violence, because if I haven't made that perfectly clear, I do understand that what happened on October 7th was senseless, was deeply tragic, was did not need to happen, but it did not happen in a vacuum, and that's what needs to be acknowledged. Um, oh yeah, so there was comments about Gabe's interview with Jan Olasan. I'm not going to pull it up because I haven't seen that myself yet, but I think that's very interesting. I think that's interesting that he got to talk to him, and I'd be very curious about what they discussed. Um, yeah, no, it's good for him. Gabe's a cool guy. I met him I made a point of introducing myself to him last year because of his video that he did on Israel and Azerbaijan. So I wanted to congratulate him on that, and yeah, just like make sure that he I wanted to make sure that he knew who I was. And yeah, he's a really cool guy. He does he's very thorough in what he does. He's a lot more consistent than I am, and I certainly could not get a video done every week personally. But yeah, I'm really thrilled that he's been getting a lot of attention lately. And uh, yeah, um, uh, Croatia for 2 years in a row gave Israel zero televotes. Would be interested to review the Israeli government ad campaign there versus other locations to really see the impact that it had on the vote. I'm pretty sure that they did have a campaign there, so that's interesting. In fact, let me just pull up this folder that I have. Albania, Armenia, Czechia, Cyprus. Yeah, Croatia. Yeah. So they did have a video specifically for Croatia. Um, yeah, I mean, at first I thought like, well, was it Croatia that didn't give them televotes last year? Because I thought it was Ukraine, and that I assumed was because Edin Golan is Russian, so they were just never gonna vote for her. Um, but yeah, who knows? Who knows why it's not working there? That video about Israel and Azerbaijan is how I found Gabe super important and now more relevant than ever. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't done so already, definitely give it a watch. Maybe after this broadcast is done, I will put that in the comments. So if you'd like refresh the page or just like find his use the search bar because that's easier. Um, Oh, okay. Croatia requires SIM cards to be issued with ID, just like in Poland. I'm curious about how that makes a difference um, with voting, though, if it does. So yeah, I mean, it's quite curious that there would be. I mean, I think what you should also notice as well is that when you look at the individual numbers, it's not like there were 12s across the board. There were a few. Let's see, public. Yeah, so like in Portugal. Oh wait, no, that's Estonia. Um, yeah, they were blanked in a few countries. Armenia didn't give Israel any points. They only got two from Serbia, two from Estonia as well, one from Ukraine, four from Iceland, none from Poland. Okay, so yeah, as you were saying before, with uh, where you need a SIM card and an ID. Yeah. Okay. So maybe that means that like you're well, yeah. Somebody explained to me how that works. Um, I read that the three countries that blanked Israel are the ones that required by law to show a photo ID to register a SIM card. Oh, okay. So when you're getting a SIM card, you need to register with an ID. That's really interesting because then if they are, I mean, let's not like take that as fact, but if let's say that not needing an ID means that you or if an ID will only limit you to one SIM card, then yeah, then you wouldn't be able to vote more than 20 times. Um, there's a possibility that SIM cards are not bought in bulk to vote for Israel. There was this example in 2013 when Azerbaijan was paying people to get SIM cards in Lithuania. Yes, exactly. Um, yeah, how about that? Like Azerbaijan has cheated twice and they're still in the competition. And it like that just goes to show you that it comes down to like keeping the contest afloat. Because if they were to take a hard action on Azerbaijan or the other five countries that were part of the jury rigging in 2022, then there would be fewer participants for the subsequent year, and therefore fewer like less money for the contest. So even when you do break the rules, it's not like you're, or at least like you know for some people who break the rules, there's immediate action. Like for example, with Spain at the top of their broadcast when they had uh, uh, made that, or not at the top of the broadcast when the commentators had mentioned the deaths in Gaza. Immediately, the EBU was like, do not mention that. But when people are literally buying SIM cards to bolster the vote, then that's not an issue. Yeah. Well, we don't know this for sure. I mean, it seems pretty likely because after it was discovered that Azerbaijan had been buying SIM cards and paying people to vote in 2013, then their results took a major hit. But yeah, uh, I, while it's safe to assume that that was probably happening, it's not a guarantee. Okay, so I've given a little bit of extra time. I've made it to the bottom of the comments, and I've said a lot more than I thought I would say. But in any case, thank you all for joining me for this little chat. It is my intention to do a properly edited video that goes into the developments. I do want to make sure that I give it a little bit of time just to see what comes out of, because there are always like responses from the EBU about certain things, but yeah, so that is my plan, to do something a little bit more in the vein of the first video from this year and the last video from last year. And yeah, so be on the lookout for that. I don't expect that much to come from me in between. If you'd like, if you're on Instagram, you can give me a follow there. It's this is the handle there. And I'm going to be traveling for a little bit, and I might do some Q&A things. So maybe if you've got something that you want to ask, I can answer it there. And also, like, the nice thing about Instagram is that when there's a news story, I can respond to it more in real time, or like more like it's much faster to get a response to it than if it's trying to make an entire video out of it. But anyway, what a roller coaster of a year once again. Thank you all so much for joining me. And yeah, I hope to have that follow-up video out within a reasonable amount of time. I'm careful to make promises because I have a bad habit of making promises and then not keeping them. But yeah, I'll leave it on this. Serving stew. Thank you very much. All right. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thank you for tuning in at this kind of unusual time, and see you soon. Take care.